Thank you, Glenn. Before we get started, can we take 2 minutes and thank Glenn for leading us through these moments? Glenn and I were talking, I think, last week about the fact that you need like a month in the woods. You know, you've earned it. So we're not going to talk to you in July, all right? You're off for July. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. What Glenn was talking about is what we're trying to accomplish here today, which is give you a few tools to help navigate the current moment, right? And one of the things that I always like to do is try to name it. What is the environment that we're living in right now? If you had to pick one word to describe your current operating environment, what would it be? Who's got the first one? Tumultuous, I love that. Volatile, one more. What, uncertain? Yeah, I think that's right. For me, the word is chaos. You know, when I think about the way that we're operating, the environment that we're operating in right now, it's constant chaos. You know, 5 years ago we had a pandemic, then we had global supply chain issues, then we had chip issues, and. It just keeps coming at us, right? And so the question, I think we all agree, is that we're not going to control chaos. It keeps coming at us. So the question now is, how do we formulate the most skillful response to that chaos? And today, the panel that we're gonna convene today is going to hopefully lift up and share with you a few ideas that team, or these folks, are using to help tame the chaos in their environment, and you can have a few things that you can take home to your teams as well. So let's start talking about chaos. Let's start talking about what it means for us and our teams. So, you know, the chaos that we're all living in is constant, and it's driven by constant change, which is exponential, right? So AI, climate change, you name it, information, all changing exponentially, which does what? It speeds up the clock. Everything has to be done faster. And because of that, and it's also reinforced by media that is constantly bombarding us with information, most of it low-value information, but it's still a constant stream of information we have to process. And the institutions that we in the past have relied on to help protect us or provide some guardrails, in a lot of cases we've either lost trust in or they're being broken down, or both. And so at the end of this, what we really have is a stress response that none of us as human beings were built to take on. We're not built to handle this much speed, this much chaos. And so think about what your natural response is to stress, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. So if you're in fight mode, which is what we all have to do as leaders, we have to fight through this. What are you looking for? You're looking for certainty, you're looking to be right, and you're trying to be fast. If you're in flight mode, then what you're trying to do is go back to the familiar. You want to run back to what is familiar to you, what you know. And if you're in freeze mode, you just want to be safe, right? At some level, all of our teams, and I've had this conversation several times in the last 24 hours, at some level, all of our teams are dealing with this idea, this stress response, fight, flight, or freeze. So if we're trying to make decisions and manage that chaos and tame that chaos, what do? We immediately start to simplify it, right? So we create these very simple models, and we divide the world into simple either-or choices, right? Because we have to go fast. And that works great in a crisis, and we're in some level in a permanent crisis. We're always lurching from one crisis to the next. The thing about either-or thinking is that it works really well in the crisis. It works really well when the problem has already been solved, basically when you've written the playbook, right? The car breaks down, and I know that I have to do either thing A or thing B, and that'll fix the problem. But what about what happens when there is no playbook? What happens when you're dealing with an opportunity or a challenge that you've never seen before? So, for example, what is the playbook for an AI-powered quantum computing future? Anybody have that yet? Right? I don't know. So what you need to do, though, is come together like the previous panel was talking about. You have to bring people together, not split them apart. You have to bring ideas together, not split them apart. So what if all of a sudden the issue is not about solving the crisis in the moment, but actually lifting up and creating tension through which, as you solve it, you then get to the new breakthrough. You then write the new playbook. So what that does, this idea of switching from either or to yes and, is it brings in all this thinking in the middle of the two ends of a continuum, right? So what I call that is the power of and. And I believe that using that power of and, this idea of more expansive collective thinking, that helps us solve challenges that either or thinking won't let you solve. So all of a sudden, you can start saying, we can do sustainability and growth. We can do scale and innovation. And yes, we can have profit and purpose. So that is the idea of the power of and. It's the idea of how we bring people together and how we drive forward continuously through a practice that will help us solve these challenges that we've never seen before. So I've been working for 35 years, helping my own team and also helping my clients tame the chaos that they've had to experience over the years. And I've developed a simple framework that I'll offer to start this conversation that our panel will then begin to lift up and bring some life to it. So 3 steps. The first step, I think, maybe is the most important, which is assess, stop, press pause, get off the treadmill, and do not try to keep up with the AI-powered quantum computing future, right? And what you do at this stage is you really try to clarify, what's my mission? Who am I serving? And from the trivial many things I could be focused on, what are the vital few? What really matters? From there, now you try to unlock and find that power of and. What are the and statements, the win-wins, that are help us bring us together to tackle the really big challenge that we just laid out? So this is how we get to the place of saying we can do scale and we can do innovation, right? We can do talent attraction and talent development, things like that. And then from there, once you've developed a strategy for that, now it's act and put it in motion, but not do it in a typical, we're going to do a big rollout command and control way, but instead, we're going to shoot, as Jim Collins would say, we're going to shoot some bullets before cannonballs. We're going to act, we're going to measure, we're going to assess, and we're going to keep continually changing and evolving as we go through that process. And so this ends up being a self-reinforcing wheel or a practice to help us tame that chaos. So I hope that that is a framework that will resonate with you and a framework that will hopefully give you a starting point to have a discussion with your own teams about how you manage this current moment. And what we're going to do now is bring up our excellent team of leaders who are doing this work right now, and they're taming chaos every day. So I'll bring up Mary, John, and Mike now. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks, for joining us for this conversation. As we were talking, as we were prepping for this conversation, we all acknowledge the fact that the current environment, in some way, shape, or form, is the same that we've always dealt with, because automotive has never been easy, but the clock speeds has never been faster, right? And one of the things, Mike, that you were talking about is this framework that we discussed. Assess, find the and then act is not too different from a model that you use at Toyota, but also you've made some tweaks to it. So you want to give us an update to that?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I have to say, I feel like a 5-year-old sitting in this chair.
God, I was just thinking that. I'm like,
so if I'm moving around, it's because I'm sinking down. Yeah, so in Toyota, our whole philosophy has always been 70% planning, 30% activity. So we really believe that if you plan well, the activity naturally happens. We're process-driven. You all heard about TPS, and it's about setting up that standardized work. And from the standardized work, you get your work elements. And once you understand your work elements, you can Kaizen, or you can always have that improvement. And we go through cycles. We call it PDCA, plan, do, check, action. It's similar to what you put up on the board in that activity. But the problem we ran into becomes a cultural problem. We're living in chaos, as you mentioned. Really, chaos has become the norm. And so as we looked at plan, do, check, action, it really became a crutch for us in that process, because the first thing we do when a big problem comes up and it doesn't fit into that plan, into that process we have, we freeze. So how do you change that cultural mind? How do you Gerald Goff was talking last night about calling an audible or changing the play on the field. I'm not going to call it Kardashian, because I didn't quite understand, if that was, you know, a naked bootlegger running around naked. I wasn't understanding what he was saying there.
I think it's an and. Yeah.
It's an and, definitely an and. But, you know, it really comes down to, you know, calling that audible. And how do we get people to react? Change is coming. And I'm a car buff. I love old cars. I love the history behind old cars. And we really look at it today as we're in this chaos. I hate to date myself, but I worked through GM's changeover, if you know what that means. I worked through the Iacocca days at Chrysler. You know, every day was chaos there as well. And how do you act to it? Well, you got to act, as you said earlier. So we've changed from PDCA to really do first. So we're putting the do first. Do something, act. And we can come back and fix that. We can then plan and check and take action. So the customer isn't seeing anything going out. That's going to be a problem. But we're getting out of that comfort zone and really trying to do it. And then the second part of that is, how do you get people to do it quickly? And I was loving the conversations going on here. Yesterday we heard about China, and China moves fast, and China really does move fast. But my mind immediately goes to, why aren't we moving fast? We've done it before. And there's stories, again, it gets back to that automotive history. The 53 Chevy, I mentioned that to a couple of people. The 53 Chevy was a car that was completely, from body structure to body panels to engine, redesigned and built in 1 year. And just let that sink in. We spend 4 years designing the vehicle and getting it ready for production. And we're trying to get that down shorter. Can we get to a 2-year cycle? Well, they did it in 1 year, but it becomes that act, that mindset that you put up there. And so how do we change that? It's not about just the activity they're doing, but it's changing the mindset. You know, they sped the escalators up in the tech center. They got rid of the chairs in the meeting rooms. They did things to promote that thought that, yes, we have to do this quickly. It's the and. It's okay to have a meeting, but we're going to do it quickly. We're going to stand up. We're going to make a decision. It's not going to be a meeting going to a meeting to another meeting. So these are the type of things we're trying to do.
That's great. John, we talked about a mindset shift yesterday as well that you've used a lot, and it's you've noticed in your team, especially as you stepped into your newer role, a default way of thinking that was really limiting. You want to share with the group what you've observed and how you've changed it?
For sure. I mean, I've seen throughout my entire career the concept of self-imposed limitations, and it's amazing to me the number of people. And in hindsight, as I look back on my entire career, Matt, I see so many more examples where people just really put self-imposed limitations on, and they didn't have to be there. I mean, I think back 7 years ago, I was in my last company, and we were approached by a customer. I'd only been in the job for about 2 weeks, and I was approached by a customer and said, "We have with another one of your competitors, we have a major recall situation. There is no way that they're going to be able to make enough parts for production and for warranty. We need your help. This is all hands on deck." Now, we're in an industry that takes 24, 30 months, 36 months to develop something and launch something. And my team said, "We can't do it. You can't." I said, "No, stop. We have to implement something that is this," and I've used it ever since. It's say how, not know. What is it going to take? Let's give them the option of saying how we can do it. And we started to develop together a concept, an idea that said, well, if we can do this, and it doesn't have to be in a linear fashion, if we do these things in parallel and you accomplish this and you give us a leeway on this test and we'll prove it later, we're going to be able to move so much faster. Within 4.5 months, we came up with an off-the-shelf. We did some soft tools to get started. We made modifications. 4.5 months, we had a product out the door. You talk about how did Chevrolet do it in redesign a car. I mean, this was unheard of to do this, and it helped them get back on track. And I'll tell you, we made fast friends with a customer to go do that. And if I fast forward into today's world, that power of I'm looking at the tariff situation we're faced with and an entire supply base. ADAC has been extremely committed to partnerships in the entire supply base. The very fragile Tier 2 and Tier 3 community in this industry who has been, cash, constrained over the last couple of years. we've made a commitment to go forward and do regular partner days. And at our level of a company, a few $100 million, that's not normal to have full-on partner days, supplier days. We've committed to it. We just had our 3rd annual last week. And part of it is to that power of and with our supply base to make sure that we're communicating our strategy, we're listening to them, we're opening the doors, we're not being tactical, we're being more strategic in doing that. And it really changes the mindset throughout our entire company and our ecosystem.
That's awesome. You know, Mary, you represent part of that tier 2, tier 3 ecosystem.
Do you need any more suppliers, John?
Sure, let's talk. Let's talk.
And we talked yesterday about how, at its core, the power of and really comes from balancing opposites. You want to elaborate on that?
Oh, there's so many opposites in today. It's crazy. Yeah, so, you know, one of the things to start with that I think you might have highlighted it up there is not just thinking about short term. You have to deal with the short term and still plan for that long term, right? So even though you're chasing crises day after day, and it's not even what's changing week to week right now, right? It's what's changing hour to hour with all of these new regulations that come up. It's keeping your team focused, not just on the short term, the things that you have to fix, but we still have to plan for that long term. So we actually, internally, we use a process. It's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, Traction, a book written by Gino Wickman. It's fantastic. But it really keeps us focused. You know, we've got these long-term goals that we look out for 10 years down the road. We get that to a 3-year level, down to a year, and what do we do each quarter? And of course, things change. So it's still an agile system that keeps you focused on that long term, but it allows you to be flexible and change still on that short-term basis.
EOS is a very powerful tool.
So
and I think it is a great way to balance. And at some level, every and does this. It gets you through today, helps you win today, but be successful in the future. You know, and that is the real challenge because it's so easy. John, you were talking about this yesterday about how difficult it is to help your team triage through the, you know, as I said earlier, and define the vital few from the trivial many. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about how you do that for your team?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in fact, this is a real life example from yesterday morning before we came up. Yesterday, I pulled together my senior leadership team. We're working through our annual planning process and long-term strategy. And I was getting to the point where because of the amount of chaos we've had, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. I'm seeing the teams, the working level teams, starting to get pulled down where they're getting concerned about getting the basics done. They want stability, right? You talked about stability earlier. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. Yep. You have to be able to still grow the business. And I needed to get the senior leaders together yesterday to talk about that long-term vision still. How do we get the stability in the short run, but how do we start to focus more on that long-term growth? And it can't be a sacrifice. And the other thing is we can't do it all ourselves. I mean, this is why I rely on the ecosystem. You know, I'm saying all the time, let's go in and work with the automakers to do unique things. Let's work with other suppliers to do things. Let's work with our supply base. Let's, within, educational institutions we're partnering with now to think differently. And that's a little bit different than where the team used to be. They used to be very, we can do it. We're the auto industry. We'll figure it out on ourselves within the company. And we have to get broader than that. So we really have started to focus on you talked about the trivial few, right? Really trying to create some additional priority that people can really get their head behind, right? That we have to have that emotional intelligence to acknowledge they're struggling. They're struggling because of the amount of pressure that's sitting there. However, we do have to keep moving in the future. And we are having that great dialogue now.
Yeah.
If I can jump on
please.
that a little bit. We started a program, we call it NEF, but it's really to give it that relief. So it's, again, building off the and. So some of our engineers, because I'm in charge of engineering, our engineers are getting burned out with the chaos. Mm-hmm. But what is the relief for an engineer? You challenge them to do something that's outside their comfort zone, right? Instead of every day, that's the problem I'm solving, we were letting them do some mobility passion projects. We're throwing out there some time for them and some money for them to come up with crazy ideas. And it's really interesting, from heart monitors, that can predict heart attacks 5 minutes before they happen, to rescue drones, to all sorts of different things. They're coming up with it. And one of the things I got questioned by my boss is, what's the benefit? Are we ever going to make medical devices or these type of things? No, but they're creating IP, and they're creating IP that they're passionate about. You don't need to encourage an engineer to do something when they're passionate about doing it, right? So you're lighting that fire, and then we see the results on the other side. They're ready to tackle some of the difficulties of the day, the running out of glass fiber and these type of things, and what do you do? Because they're really focused on, I'm an engineer in the auto industry, and I can basically do anything.
Mm-hmm. That is really important, especially during that assess phase, to get connected back to your why. Why are we here? The mission of most companies sits up on the wall, but do you really bring it to life? And I think this is where these moments, EOS is a great example of how that actually ties a mission directly to action. And Mary, you talked yesterday as we were prepping a little bit about the obligation and the challenge of leading in a moment like this or in an environment like this, and the need to be proactive and transparent. To Mike's point about bringing people along who are stressed and burned out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I always like to use the example when you get on an airplane and they say, put your own mask on before helping others. So for me, it's really important to start from myself, right? And John and I talked about this, how important it is to actually take care of yourself first. Because a lot of us as leaders, that's the last thing we think about.
Yeah.
And if anybody here who has kids, right? You're a mom, you're at home, the last thing you think about is yourself. You're trying to take care of your family. So first and foremost, I think that's really important, is to make sure that you're not losing your mind. I also have, if you are, at least try to pick it up along the way. I always talk about team and how important my teams are to me. I'm really fortunate to surround myself with some great people, to the point with, I shared a story, I won't share the same verbiage I used yesterday, but my COO and I were having a meeting, and he walked out and walked back in and closed the door behind him, and I was sitting there going, oh, now what? And he challenged me and asked me why I was acting a certain way. Again, won't use the same verbiage. But it really opened my eyes. I was like, wow, he's calling me out, basically. It's funny, that same morning, my husband did the same thing. He said, are you ever going to be in a good mood again? Like, ask me again in 3.5 years. I don't know. But it's really important to have that mirror to look in, because if you're not your best self, how the hell are you going to be there for your team, right? And you've got to bring your best self. So first and foremost, always put your oxygen mask on. And for me, transparency, I think in leadership, you can't stand up and always have sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes I have to stand up in front of my team and I recognize their burnout, their fears. And we just bring it to light and shed some light on it, and then we work through it together. So really being that transparent, honest leader, because people can see through the BS at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to it, Matt. So one of the things that we look at, yesterday someone made the comment, leadership is lonely, and I use that all the time inside the company. Walk a day in the shoes of any of us as leaders of an organization. It's tough. And this is the power of an event like this, is getting all of us together to be able to talk, but building that strong network to be able to go out. One of the things we started to do as well is retool our board, which, we've had a lot of people who have been on there for decades on our board, private company. But I said, we're missing some skill sets that we need to be able to give my leaders on my executive team other outlets. So we added a really strong technical mind, and we're adding another financial mind, and we're, that can challenge and be a strong network for my leaders as well. But I'm also encouraging them to go out and get more involved, right? My CTO is the co-chair of Tech Week in Grand Rapids, right? To go out and build that network, right? So that it's not just inside trying to solve things with our own little knowledge, right? So I think that power of AN going out to the community, going out to other leaders, and building that network is also strong.
You feel less alone.
You feel less alone.
Misery loves company.
Yes. And here we are.
That is one of the convening power of a group like this, the ability to create community. I think the prior panel discussed the fact that there's power in the ecosystem. Is something that we can't underestimate, because especially going forward in a world that will be powered by AI, will be powered by quantum computing, brain power, computing power, that's not special. It's cheap, it's easy, everyone's got the same information. The only thing that's new and unique are people. And so getting the most out of people and being able to optimize the people equation is really important.
I think doubling down on your culture, right?
Yeah.
On your culture and your organization and really sticking to it, especially in times of crisis, because that's what you have to lean on is your culture. And that's what gets you there. It gives your team that safe spot. It gives you really the guidelines on where to go. So for us, culture is everything.
Mm-hmm. Mike, talk a little bit about that. You have the pleasure of being an engineer and leading a lot of engineers, not known to be a big emotive bunch. I say that as the father of a chemical engineer myself, and our son Jack is not exactly the most emotive guy, although he's wonderful. But tell me about what that's like to lead, say now, compared to maybe 5-10 years ago.
That's a really good question. Looking back, I think the biggest issue we have, especially with the generation coming in, is their experiences through school and their education is perfectly different than, say, when I was back in school a couple of years ago. It's a, how do I say this properly? It's about building that passion underneath them, helping them understand not only the technology they're using or the challenges we're putting in front of them, but also we talked about the community and building community, that there's resources for them to go to and understand. I think for us, the biggest challenge we had was through COVID. I learned that, you can actually design a car from home. I didn't think that was possible. Our IT department broke through and did some great things, but we had to change our mindset, why we kept our culture. So I'm going to combine a few of these things to answer this question. We had to change our mindset of how we do our job, but how do you keep your culture at the same time? And now we're faced with the crisis of coming back to work. And we have two issues with that. One, a lot of the engineers decided they like working from home, so why can't they stay home and work? But the same group of engineers, the newer ones, 5 and less years, come and say, no one's training me to do anything, right? So we have all this electronic training, but we train, especially in Toyota, but we train by OJT, on-the-job development. And having that mentor, having that person sitting next to you explaining, I hear a lot about AI, and AI is going to take all these jobs. We pay engineers because they solve problems, and that's what they're taught to do. It's not, their math skills, it's not these things. It's how do you solve a problem? How do you solve a problem in a very systematic way to make sure that we understand the prioritized problem, we understand the root cause, and then we can understand what the best countermeasure is to move forward. So as we look at this and developing the engineers, and this is why I hesitated when you asked the question, is what are we doing today? Well, we had to shift our thinking, and now we're in the process of shifting back. And it doesn't have to be, and I'm going to go back to what you said at the beginning, there's an and in there. It doesn't have to be this or that. It has to be a hybrid system. It has to be the and. We can work in a hybrid environment, and we need to go back to basics and teach engineers how to solve problems. You have to go what we call to the Gemba. You have to go to the work. You have to see with your own eyes. You can't do everything behind a screen. You have to see how the vehicle is going together or how the parts are going together. You need to touch them. If I go back to our 100-year history, one of the fundamental principles that Ono put together with TPS was an engineer should get his hands dirty 3 times a day. You have to wash your hands. In other words, you have to go and see what's going on. You need to talk to people. And this is where the shift in engineering, we've gone one side and we've gone back, and you drew that chart, that bell-shaped curve in the middle. We need to get back to that middle. There's a balance there. And for us to be good engineers, we need to go and see and talk to the operators on the line. We need to go and see the manufacturing, whether it's a casting or machining, and understand and get our hands dirty so that we can be better at what we're doing. Even though we have all these tools analytical tools to help us. Without that basic knowledge, we can never do a good job.
I think that's a really interesting observation about the middle of that bell-shaped curve. I drew that really because in a lot of ways, that's where there's a lot of wisdom in a crowd. There's a wisdom in your team, but there's also an art and a science to pulling that wisdom out. Like you have to do what I call deep listening with people, which is sitting with them and not just asking them surface level questions, but going a layer or two deeper. And you can only get to that place if you already have a relationship, if you already have trust. And that's important. Not now, it's more important now than ever because that trust actually helps you generate speed. So Mary, you work in an environment that's not only domestic but global. Tell us a little bit about how that works for you.
Oh, lately it's been a little tough. I have a pretty large team over in China. So as you can imagine, the geopolitics at play and that awful T word that continues to come up hour after hour. A lot of it has to do, so thankfully we've got a great team there. Again, our teams are very close. They work very well together, over the ocean. But it has been challenging to keep the fear at bay. We've got this amazing group of supply base there that, quite frankly, we have to unfortunately start peeling ourselves away from. And my team in Shanghai gets nervous, right? They see all of these things happening. So it is definitely a fine balance of making sure that we're having those transparent conversations, making sure that our teams on both sides of the ocean are clearly communicating. And just continuing to work together the best that we can. And it really is. It's building that trust. It's quenching those fears. It's constant communication. I cannot stress enough the importance of just constant communication. You talked a little bit earlier about fight, flight, or freeze, right? And I feel like a lot of times we just get this moment where everybody freezes and doesn't quite know what to do. It's a lot of, as a leader, it's a lot of having those personal, intimate conversations with people.
And I think you see that freeze and also the flight response in employee engagement data.
Oh, yeah.
I did some research prior to coming here. I grabbed some data from Gallup that would tell you about 75% of corporate America are disengaged, right? So employees in corporate America are disengaged, and about the same percentage of middle managers are burned out. So these are the people that you all rely on to actually, manage that frontline worker. They're stretched to the limit.
So we did something, and I can't take credit for it. My COO actually did this about 6 weeks ago when we were just going through it. He decided that everything that we always share with each other just seems to be bad news. So now we have a dashboard in our SharePoint, and it's called the Good News Dashboard. So we don't care what happens. It could be something at home. It could be you found a penny on the floor, whatever it is. You're going to share your good news. So if you've got good news to share now, you go on there and you post your good news so that everybody can see it. And it's really helped, believe it or not, just those little things. My sales manager will come in and say, hey, we just got this opportunity, and she'll post it, get people excited. So it's those little things like that you can do that make a big difference.
Winning is fun.
Yeah, you know what? And sometimes you forget that there's still good things happening out there. And let's just put that front and center because we're dealing with so much all the time. Let's make an effort to put the good stuff out front to keep people excited.
John, it sounds like you're
your digital grateful journal right there.
Yeah, right?
Sounds like you're running down the same path.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we just acquired an electronics company based here in Michigan to continue to grow and diversify within our business. That brings with a lot of chaos. I mean, when you're trying to integrate, it added about, I'm going to call it probably another 18-20% employee increase on it for us, and about a 10% revenue increase for us overall. It's pretty sizable what we're going to be adding to this business, but it's bringing chaos with it. And we're having to remind people along the way to take a breath, be excited about where we can go with this. Yes, we're going to work through some integration problems, but we're going to find our way through it.
That is awesome. Well, a couple of things here. I've made a list of some of the topics that we've been talking about, and we'll go through them at the end. But as we start to begin to wrap up here, as you've reflected on chaos, how the power of and can bring it together, I'll just go down the list. Mike, if you could sort of summarize that in a nugget or two or a takeaway or two What are some things that you're going to take away from today in this conversation?
Well, again, we talk about positive. I love the end in hearing that, sending out something positive to your staff and reinforcing that, yeah, we have crisis, but there's ways around the crisis and there's things we need to do. It's always that and. It's not an either or. So again, I'm an engineer, so when you put the graph up there and I can see the graph in either side of this, the and is really a powerful word. And we haven't used that in that context before. We've used it. But bringing that up and talking not only to our VPs, but right down to our managers, and how do they promote that and? This doesn't have to be, every problem doesn't have to be the end of the world. We're living through crisis, but what are the opportunities? And this is really what I'm taking away. In listening to the last couple of days, what are the opportunities? Can we call that audible in change? We have Hoshin, or we have our yearly goals and objectives that are set up to do, but why not have an and in there and move forward and change the direction as necessary to make sure that we're promoting, whether it's resources, whether it's hiring, these type of things, to make sure that at the end of the day, we're really pushing forward the industry. And our goal is to be a mobility company, so how do we push forward to be a mobility company with that and on
That's
it?
awesome. John, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, high-performing teams over-communicate with each other and figure out the and pretty quickly. We've had to find our way through different crises. I've had to knock down silos when I joined the business, and we've really gotten to the point where just working together on topics and communicating openly, that very transparent culture, and like you said, it comes down to culture, has changed the game.
Mary, how about you?
I would agree with that. So team, I always preach it. Teams are the most important thing. People run companies, right? Not things. So it's the people that you put in place. One of the things that I want to share, and I say this probably ad nauseum to my team, and they're sick of hearing it, but when there is chaos, look for the opportunity. Mm-hmm. Each one of us have opportunities. We started a whole new business segment just a few months ago based on the tariffs that we didn't even think, we didn't see that before. So definitely where there's chaos, step back, take a breath, because there's going to be opportunity in the middle of that chaos.
For sure. So a few things that I wrote down here. How not know. I love that one.
Love that.
Do first. I think that was another great one. The focus on the need for balance and humanity in a very technical environment is really critical, because it's the software, it's the people that are the special thing. The idea of finding the opportunity and also doing it in the context and leveraging an ecosystem. It's not, and everyone's not on their own. It is an and. I think those are some really critical takeaways that we can all use today and in the future as we go home. One last thing, John, you've got an announcement for the Automotive Hall of Fame that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I'm blessed. There's a lot of Hall of Fame board members in this room, and I thank all of them for their service, and the staff over here as well, with Sarah Cook, our president, and Sandy on the biz dev over here. Two big announcements came out this morning. The first one is that last year we were at the train station. We keep picking great venues. This year we're going to be at the department at Hudson's, the new Hudson's building. Awesome. So it's a big announcement for that. And if you talk about the power of and, MEMA has signed up. Happy birthday, Colin Shaw, today. MEMA has signed up with the Hall of Fame to be a 5-year presenting sponsorship as we look to elevate the untold stories even among the supplier community. So a couple of big news stories. So thank you to all the board members on the Hall of Fame and the team as well.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for your leadership. Thanks for lifting up this idea of and let's go tame some chaos. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Awesome.
Thanks.